Live from Kakariko Village. Broadcast throughout the Retroverse, transmitted to the real world via a maze of wires connecting a Super Nintendo to a Wii, to a Wi-Fi network, and finally to the Internet. The Techno Funk Boy presents the Retro Zoo Super Show. Now here are your hosts, Kai and Steven.
Thank you for tuning in. This is the Retro Zoo Super Show, and I am your host, Kai. I am with, as always, our producer, Drum. Drum, how are you doing today?
I am doing well, assuming that we get to all of our commercials.
Okay, we'll deal with that in a minute. I'm just trying to introduce the program. This is, if you are new, welcome. First of all, welcome. This is your weekly discussion of retro gaming, game music, game-related news, all of the other sort of stuff that goes along with it. Basically anything that catches our eye, that catches our interest when it comes to retro gaming, in any sort of related topic. So, Today is actually a really going to be a really interesting show. So last week I was able to record an interview with speedrunner Omnigamer, and we will be presenting that in just a little bit. So the first thing though that I wanted to address is
getting to the commercials.
No, not getting to the Okay, we've had a recent string of interviews and discussions about different, gaming topics, and they've all been really interesting to me, and I keep like not inserting a commercial break as we go, and I don't think I don't really think that's a problem, personally. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but, apparently we've had some complaints, and Drum has taken them personally, and he is very interested in getting that rectified. The complaints were not from the actual fans of the podcast. They were specifically from one of the advertisers. So, and that's fair. That's fair. But unfortunately, I didn't really give myself time for a break this time either. So
you promised.
I know I did, but what we were talking about was really, really interesting, and so I really wanted to stick on that. Okay, so we do need to get into a little bit of news, and this has been a topic that has been stirred up quite a bit online in the recent months, and more, more so in the recent weeks. But as much as I like to avoid, actual happenings in the retroverse, and stick with just good old fashioned nostalgia, I did think it was important to to discuss, and that is the dragster record in Todd Rogers. So, a little bit of background for those who aren't caught up. I'll try to run through this and make this as clear as possible. So, going back into the days of when the arcades ruled, getting into Atari, very early Nintendo. The games were not nearly as much story based as they were points based. And so, a lot of these games you just kind of kept going until you died, but you were trying to get the high score, right? You were trying to get on the leaderboard. There was an organization that popped up called Twin Galaxies that tried to kind of really solidify these scores and instead of just making it like on one machine, just keep track of them. There were a lot of personalities that popped up at this time, and one of them was Todd Rogers. And Todd Rogers has been no stranger to controversy when it comes to his records. A lot of them seem iffy or downright impossible. I think his Centipede score was like, okay, let me pull this up. Okay, his Centipede score he claimed was 65 million when the runner up was 58,000. In Wabbit, he recorded a score of 1698, but the game normally just ends when you hit 1300, and so stuff like this. Well, one of the records that he had was in this Atari game called Dragster. And what Dragster is, it's a drag race, and so it's a very, very short game, but it's very precise, and you've got to be able to propel this race car. I mean, just really fast all of a sudden through all the gears, and despite it being a very short game, it's a lot of fun, and so he recorded his record time as 5.51 seconds. So that was like 35 years ago, and as time goes on, no one's been able to recreate this. He did. There were claims of proof at the time. Polaroid camera. Obviously no video. I mean, this was the 80s. This is how we did things, right? I remember sending in Polaroid pictures of my game I was playing to Nintendo Power, because this is how we proved things. We didn't have YouTube, we didn't have Twitch, and so this is kind of how we proved things. So that by itself is not unusual. But there was claims that there was proof. Activision even accepted his claim. Guinness Book of World Records accepted his claim, and of course Twin Galaxies has been a big promoter of Todd Rogers, and in fact Todd Rogers did work for them for a time. So moving forward, I think as time goes on, this record seems to be doubted more and more and more. And then one speedrunner named Omnigamer, who actually we're going to interview.
Is this what we are interviewing him about?
No, not exactly.
Because this is really interesting.
Well, I think so too, but we're actually going to be talking to him about something that I think is much cooler. But we did delve into this just a little bit, and especially because of his role in it and what's been going on lately. And so I didn't, and so I definitely wanted to kind of summarize because I know a lot of you don't follow the kind of current happenings, and so I did kind of want to give an overview. And so what Omnigamer did was really just took apart the game and figured out the math behind how the time is determined, set up a spreadsheet that would allow you to kind of, it's like frame by frame, if I hit this at this frame, what's going to be the result? And according to the spreadsheet, the fastest time possible is a 5:57, not a 5:51. So since that, Ben Heck actually, set up a test where he could control the race by a computer with frame perfect inputs, and had Rogers sit with them as they tested out the spreadsheet. And according to those tests, it didn't seem like the 551 was possible there either. And so in the last few months since this stuff has been coming out, the controversy has really exploded. A couple of Twin Galaxies has had at that point said, okay, we're gonna research this more, and we're going to come out with our decision. And since then, a couple of more pieces have fallen together so that Twin Galaxies made its announcement much earlier than expected, and actually banned Todd Rogers from their records completely, in all games, not just that one. And it was and I know that I'm really rushing through this story. That decision was very surprising. And like I said, I'm going to get more into specifically Twin Galaxies role and everything in the private Facebook group. Please do look for us on Facebook so we can delve more into this. I just really don't have time to go through everything about it right now, and that's not why you tuned in anyways. Obviously we talk about retro games, we talk about speedrunning, and that's exactly what we brought Omnigamer on to do, is to talk about a book that he's coming out with about speedrunning, and there's a free preview on them internets, and we have a link. We have a link in our show notes. That is technofunkboy.com/23 number 2 the number 3. That's 23 for episode 23. And for those who are interested in more, kind of more of the story, a little bit of the background stuff, I'll put some links in there about the Twin Galaxies ordeal, fiasco, debacle. I really don't know how to put this. It wasn't overly pretty. But since then, and this is and really one of the reasons I'm glad I didn't spend too much time on this topic at all, because it seems like news is still coming out and it's really fresh. But in the last weeks, Billy Mitchell's records, specifically on Donkey Kong, have come into question as well. Now, Billy Mitchell, if you've seen King of Kong, you know Billy Mitchell. He is one of those original superstars in gaming. When gaming did not really even have superstars yet, but it was acquiring the first ones. When arcades were fresh and new, and Atari was just coming out, and we got our first real public gamers, people that we would actually recognize, and not just Joe Blow down the street who always seems to have the top score on Mario Brothers or something. These were people who were exceptionally good at pretty much everything they played, and became very well known for that, and became very closely tied with Twin Galaxies and everything that was going on there. And so his Donkey Kong record has been called into question, and we're just gonna have to wait and see what happens with that. But I think in general, some cleansing over at Twin Galaxies would be a very good thing, and I'm all for just really transparency when it comes to these records, because it's just these are things that inspire a lot of us, just world records in general, and it's like and it's like your favorite player, your favorite baseball player who has the home run record, is suspected of taking steroids or something like that. It cheapens everything. It cheapens the whole gaming community when the records that we have posted, that we all know, those of us who are involved in all this know and are in awe of, aren't real. And like in sports, we're going to have cheaters. We're going to have people who are breaking the rules. But we as a community, I think that we should be doing what we can to make sure that those records that we have, that the people that we're lifting up as truly great players are in fact great players, and that those numbers are legitimate. Real records set by real people are an inspiring thing. The real records encourage people to go all out, to work hard, to be the best that they can be. And, records like saying, I have 65 million points, when the second place person has 58,000, they cause doubt, they discourage competition, they discourage the next generation from coming up and shooting at it. And I think it is the healthiest thing in the world, seeing like how often the speedrun records, for example, get turned over and sharpened a little bit. I think that's the healthiest thing in the world, and I think it's all the more healthy when the people involved are encouraging others to go after those records, which is a lot of what we do see in speedrunning. And so, with all that being said, I want you to tune in to this to this interview with Omnigamer. We're going to have again, we have the links to. There's a free preview of his book, and so we're going to have the links. So you can see, it's a substantial preview that you can see what the book is about, how it's set up. Take a look at it. It has incredible illustrations. Those are all going to be in the show notes, technofunkboy.com/23. And, we really appreciate Omnigamer for being here, and let's get right to it.
I'm going to insert a commercial right here.
Okay, drum.
He comes in the night, seemingly out of nowhere, a blur of yellow whose only mission is justice. His name is already legend, but the reality doesn't quite line up with the myth, and we're about to find out exactly how wrong we've been about him. He is the Yellow Canary. The Yellow Canary is a comedic thriller by Paul Lytle about a would-be superhero who may just be crazy enough to make a difference. The Yellow Canary by Paul Lytle, available from Amazon in print and on Kindle. Check for the link in the show notes.
We're back.
Okay, so let's get to our topic today, and I have on the line with me Omnigamer. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So just as kind of preliminary thing, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
So I'm Omnigamer. I've mainly been doing speedrunning for the last 6 years or so. Before that, I had done some stuff with competitive Super Smash Brothers, but more recently, I have had a lot of runs at GDQs, and I've really enjoyed this process of going from scratch in terms of knowledge on speedruns. So a couple of years ago, I sat down and decided, hey, I'm going to make a book on this. And that's probably what the bigger news is these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I saw on Twitter, when you, I guess, originally released a kind of a preview of this book, and just for our viewers, the book is called Speedrun Science: A Long Guide to Short Playthroughs, which I love that subtitle. That's great. So, and so I'll tell you my first reaction to it, because I got into speedrunning as a viewer just a few years ago, and at first it kind of seemed as like, wow, these people are really talented. They're going really fast. But the more I looked at it, it's like, wow, they're actually doing some really complicated stuff. And so I opened this book going, okay, this could be pretty cool. This could be really, really dry. And I opened it up and immediately started drooling, because the stuff in the preview is fantastic. It's very readable. The layout is great. The illustrations are great. It makes sense, and it's understandable. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really pumped to see the full thing. So,
glad to hear it.
First of all, do we have a release date at this point?
There's no solid release date, but if everything goes according to our current roadmap, we should have books off of the printers in May or June.
May or June, that's fantastic. Okay, so off the printer, so this is going to be a physical book and not simply like an ebook.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah, the very first edition is going to be hardcover, normal book. We're looking at the options for digital release and later down the line some softcover, but for right now we're sticking with the hardcover first edition.
That's good to hear, because like I said, the layout is pretty fantastic, and ebooks, I love ebooks, but they do lose something when it comes to layout, and so that this is going to be to have a print edition is really good news.
Right.
So what was it that made you decide, hey, we need a book about this?
Oh gosh, I think in 2014 on Speed Demos Archive, I posted a thread that was ambitious for the time, basically saying that, hey, we've got all these things that people have learned about how to route these games, how to investigate them, how to actually run them, and there's no single place where you can go and get all that knowledge. It's kind of spread around, and when you dive in, you start to learn it firsthand. But for everybody else, I mean, it's kind of intimidating. So my first idea was to get other people involved in this and see who was interested in writing articles, writing out what they thought was a good approach for how they would go about speedrunning stuff. And there was interest at the time, but really it's one of those things that until it gets started, there's nothing that really happens. And more, it just seemed like, well, if this is going to happen, might as well just do it myself, because I've got the interest right now and I've got the motivation. I don't know that I can say the same in a couple of years from then. So I started down and just really started to look at, well, here are the things that I would do. Here are all of the different things that I would need to consider when I go through these games and things like that. And eventually it just made sense, rather than to be like a series of guides online, that put it together as something a little more cohesive. And that's where the idea to turn it into a book really came from. And I mean, my own background, way long ago in my youth, I was convinced that I was going to write a book someday, but I was also pretty sure it was going to have dragons and sword fighting and a whole bunch of other stuff in it. So this was a bit of a change.
This kind of does.
Somewhere, I'm sure they'll find it.
I think I saw a wizard in there. No, I did. Yeah, there's a wizard in there. That's great. No, that's great. And, from me personally, it's like, I know exactly what you're talking about, because in the last few years of even being a speedrun fan, first of all, it seems intimidated because, you thought you were good at this game and you're not, and you're seeing somebody just utterly destroy it. And the initial thought is, oh, wow, that's incredible. I can't do that. And then you get, you kind of look at it more and you're like, well, I don't know, maybe. And then you realize all the little tricks, the little things that happen, behind the scenes, but in the controller that you're not even really seeing, to just optimize this and make this one just a little bit faster. And you get back to that point of, yeah, I can't do that. And so, like, my journey has been several years in the making, and I'm just now reaching the point that I'm starting to learn how to speedrun a game. And now I'm, now I don't have a Twitch stream, and so now it's kind of like, okay, first of all, I got to learn how to do this game, but now what else do I need? And this book covers all of that. And it's really cool. And so that one of the many reasons I'm really looking forward to digging into the whole thing.
Yeah. And what you're saying rings true in a lot of ways. It's something completely different when you're on the outside looking at somebody who's already put in hundreds of hours in trying to play this game, one way or another. And what you don't see in their actions, in their route, everything that they've set up and built for it, is this knowledge. And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people miss. It makes sense if you just say, hey, yeah, he's really good at the game because he understands it. But it doesn't really click until you've started to experience that for yourself. And that's something that I hope a lot of people become willing to try. I spend a lot of time trying to discuss like the proper ways to learn about a game. And as part of that, hopefully it becomes that much more enjoyable for you as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good. I kind of wanted to get into a little bit, and there's a section of the free preview on this, but I tell you what, let's back up one step, because you have this book set up into three sections, and just running through it is section one is the philosophy of it, which is, breaking down from the very beginning of what in the world is a speed run, but also why, which is a question that pops up very often. You might have heard it before. People, I tell people what I did last weekend, which is trying to learn glitches in Final Fantasy IV. They're like, why? And so that's a really good question to try to tackle.
Well, it's not just that it's a good question, it's that you're going to find so many different answers along the way, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people just assume that all the speedrunners are in it so that they can get that world record and be better than all their friends. And I would say, honestly, it's a rather small portion of the community that's their primary motivation. There's just so many more things that you can gain from trying to speedrun that are really fulfilling beyond chasing records and that kind of thing. It's certainly a part of it. Nobody's going to be driven by only one motivation 100%.
Sure.
But, there's just a lot more to enjoy and really reasoning to speedrun overall that I think a lot of people might dismiss if they're not too familiar with it overall.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I'll say this, it's like, when I was going through Final Fantasy IV, this last weekend, and I wasn't even timing myself, because I was trying to learn glitches is what I was trying to do, but getting to the end with at least the end game timer being a good 20 hours shorter than when I originally played it. It's like I am still hours upon hours upon hours from getting anywhere close to the world record, but that was a lot of fun, and that's one of those things. Like I'm not even thinking about a world record at this point, but that was fun, and I can get more out of that by continuing to go, and so I'm pretty pumped about it, and so I know what you mean. It's not always about a record, at least for everybody, and there is a lot of just enjoyment that you can get out of this.
Yeah, and the enjoyment, I talk a little bit about this in the book too. The enjoyment largely comes from the fact that speedrunning is challenging. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't like to look at it in those words.
Sure.
But it's just something along the lines of, it's fulfilling because you've accomplished something that is actually difficult. You've gone through, you've trained up, you acquired the knowledge that you need to go through these tasks and to get this time. And it really doesn't matter necessarily what the time is, but the fact that you've pushed yourself to accomplish a goal. And I mean, that follows for just about anything in life, but for speedrunning specifically, it goes a long way in driving people to do better, is just pushing themselves and seeing what they're capable of.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Next section of the book is a little bit of the history, and we really are kind of in the middle of the explosion, or maybe even at the beginning of the explosion, and it's really interesting. I mean, even in the last few years that I've been watching, I've seen this grow pretty much exponentially. And so, I've been talking to, an actual friend of mine, Jim's friend, who was a Mario World runner several years ago. And, in the time of recording it on VHS and mailing it in, for somebody to review it. And just about all the stuff that he's seen, but going through this is, it's really interesting how in the space of really in the last 10 years, how much this has grown.
Yeah, it's really, it's really hard for me to actually describe all the things that have changed in just the half a dozen years since I personally started doing speedruns. Not only as far as just how many people are involved, but the way that it's done has evolved quite a bit as well. Mm-hmm. And that's partially thanks to streaming services becoming more available. It's partially thanks to more mainstream recognition through Games Done Quick and other events like that. But yeah, even just within the last 5 or 6 years, you have a lot of different challenges that were overcome through better technology and availability, just more inspirational runs, of course. And as you go further and further back in history, there's some pretty notable moments where speedrunning kind of had these enormous moments of growth or finding its own identity. And I try to capture enough of those in the book. I would say that probably one of my biggest regrets of sorts with the book is simply that I can't include everything.
Right, yeah.
I've tried to make as much as I could part of the book, but there's always going to be those extra stories that really add flavor and really kind of define how some of these major things that we take for granted today came to be. And, I would love to include them. Who knows, maybe another book sometime in the future. But for now, I would say that this is a pretty rudimentary exploration of what it means to be speedrunning and how far we've come.
Right, yeah. Well, and it's not like the topic that you tackled was like a really narrow one either. I mean, we say speedrunning, but there's such a variety in games, in styles, even in a single game. The different things you can, the different categories, the different events. And I mean, just as an example, I have a friend who is looking at starting to run Contra. And, she and I are going to have very different approaches, me doing an RPG and her doing an action platformer. And so, there's such a wide variety of things that's coming out of this community that, I don't envy you trying to narrow that down.
Well, so there's more overlap than you'd think with a lot of these games. So I would encourage you. I'm sure that you will as you go through this process of learning your game and her learning hers. But keep up communication. See what kind of things she comes across, and you should also inform her of like kind of your own process and what you've found. And you might find that there's ways that you can apply those things between the two games that you never would have thought of otherwise. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the beauty of it, is that there's always some other thing to consider that might not have been apparent immediately. And even across these majorly different genres, there might be things that you can apply in one or the other. Right.
Well, yeah, and a good example of that is something I wouldn't have thought that I would need to learn doing an RPG, but I'm going to have to is stuff like timing, precision inputs, audio cues, and you kind of start just going, okay, they're going to have to worry about all of the frame perfect tricks and stuff, and I'm just going to have to learn how to menu fast. But that's actually not true.
You don't want to. There's a lot of effort that goes into working on good menus.
Yeah, well, yes, that was a good half of my most recent time was just trying to do menuing. It's kind of brutal, but. Third section is speedrun practice, and this is really, where you're getting into the first of all the nitty gritty of how to set things up. Are you going to stream? Just how to hook everything up, but also how are you considering time saves? And it's speedrunning is not, one thing it's distinctly not is just. I can play this game, making my character run the entire time because I know what's coming. There's a lot more going on with it, of really considering, okay, if I lose a second here, or more likely a tenth of a second here, I can gain, 0.2 of a second later. And really weighing out everything, trying to figure out, is there a time save here? It's not just, I will run as fast as I can. There's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, too, where you don't realize how difficult or tricky some of the things that you're doing are until you actually try and teach somebody else. And I had a lot of those moments as I was actually writing portions of the book to try and help describe, like, here are the kind of things that you do to learn about the game that you're playing. Here are the things that you do to actually weigh your options. Here's what you do to just practice. And a lot of those really made me think, as I was just going through this, like, what is it that we all do to try and get better at this? And honestly, so just as a little backdrop here, the practice segment of the book is some 50 to 60% of the entire book by pages.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to go through, and I actually further subdivided into 3 more sections for investigation, routing, and execution, which I would consider the 3 phases of doing a speed run. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's all manner of topics that I try to go through, but it really dawned on me later that just there's so much stuff to cover. You can't just go through and assume that the person that you're trying to help is going to be running an RPG, or that they're going to be working on doing Contra. And it's you have to try and find the common ground between those. So like, what could help players in both positions or with both preferences, really trying to accomplish their goals, which is hopefully to go fast.
Right.
And there's a lot that really comes into play. And I'm, like I said, with history, I'm happy to have been able to put down as much as I have, but then I realized that there's still so much more that I would have liked to cover, but just didn't make the cut.
Yeah, that's it exactly. And I'll say, you know, one of the best things that I found, you know, with my limited experience about speedrunning though, is the community and how willing to help everybody is. And I say everybody, of course, loosely. I'm sure there's one jerk out there, right? But like, you know, I mean, in you know, in my case, learning the route for Final Fantasy IV is, you know, somebody wrote out exactly what they did to win, and hey, you can do it too. Do this, you know, mm-hmm. And there seems to be just a real great willingness to help, camaraderie in the community that really sets it apart from, you know, a lot of competitions that other competitions that we enjoy.
Yeah, that's actually something that's been I would say a hallmark of the speedrunning community specifically since way back when, even before I started. And that actually goes back a long ways from when the speedrun side of it kind of split off from the scoring community.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with the openness and availability of information. People were always willing to provide what their actual run was. That was both the evidence and the support that you'd give to other players is by, here, look at this video of the run that I did. And if you have questions, let me know and I'll try to help you. Whereas historically, a lot of the score type approaches have been about trying to stay at the top. And that unfortunately leads to, I mean, not universally, but it leads to some scenarios where you have people unwilling to share what their particular strategy is, how they approach certain problems. And honestly, it keeps the whole community back from going forward. They can certainly have their reasons for it, but it's just something very different when it breaks down to whether or not you treat the speed run or score attempt that you're trying to do as something trying to further the game in a way that hasn't been done before, as opposed to something that you want to wear as a crown. Mm-hmm. And I would say in general, speedrunning has always been about trying to make the game better, make your ability to play through the game better, as opposed to trying to obtain the bragging rights just because you're on the top of the leaderboard.
Right. I am going to ask you one question on
Sure.
Todd Rogers. But that kind of leads into, you know, and you know, and this episode's going to air a week from now. And so there's so much news blowing up. I'm not going to ask you about the news, but
okay.
It seems to me that, you know, what you were doing with Dragster was what the speedrunning community does. It's, I've always seen it as we're very meticulous about our scores. We're very open about everything. If stuff doesn't look right, we pull it apart. And but on the other side of it, kind of that secrecy of, we have the top score, let's keep it.
Mm-hmm. So for some of that, I can really understand the arguments. Standards for evidence have evolved a lot over the years. Certainly you wouldn't be able to submit the same things that you would in the 80s that you would now. So there's just some artifacts, is what I like to call them, from scores and times and anything else, any other achievements from way back then that really just aren't sufficient under today's microscope. And for a lot of things, there might be some that are suspicious, but you wouldn't ever be able to say for sure. And so I can understand some healthy skepticism when people go around challenging historical scores and things like that. But I think that there's also a lot that could be done in trying to better understand the games and to use the evidence that is available, even no matter how kind of piecemeal it might be, to put together the story and to try and figure out whether or not some of these are actually as they claimed. And in a lot of cases that might not even be necessary, like they might have been scores or times that have been long since beaten. But the context is still important, especially for some of these more major scores and times. It's just, you really want to uncover the truth simply so that you can reference it for everybody down the line who's trying to chase those things.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the main piece of it.
Very good. In one of the things we try to do on this show is we do, even though we're a retro gaming podcast, we're not trying to be like all nostalgia for, the people my age who are looking back at their Nintendo, but we actually want to foster an excitement about it, with younger people who might not have experienced it. And that's especially true with speedrunning. We want to be a gateway into speedrunning to kind of point people in good directions on, what might be, good entry points, fun to watch, might be easier to understand good entry points. So is there any place that you would direct people who are hearing about this stuff for the first time? Oh, this is interesting to me. Still a few months before this book comes out. Where should I go? What should I look at?
Honestly, I feel that the easiest way to become more invested in speedrunning is just to try it yourself. And that doesn't mean that you have to go in super hard and be all aiming for the record. I'm going to use the best strats right away. I'm going to try and spend all my evenings practicing. That's not what that means. Just the easiest way to see if it's something that like you would personally enjoy is to just pick up one of your favorites, whether it's some old game on Nintendo or Super Nintendo or something more modern, and play through it again. Don't necessarily play for speed, but play through it with some curiosity. Go through, try and find out things that you may not have noticed before, something that you might have taken for granted. Like, hey, is this, maybe this mechanic works in a different way, or maybe this weapon that I completely ignored before is actually pretty useful. And look for moments like that, because for me personally, what I enjoy about games is discovery. And what I've found is that if you can keep something fresh, you can learn something new about it, it's going to be that much more endearing to you. And if you take something that you already enjoy and you go and find out something new about it just by playing it slightly differently, that's going to just open up a whole new world to you. And then I want you to think about how you can apply that if you're trying to go fast. Because that's where the hook is. If you can think about, wow, if I can play through this game again and I can discover so much more that I never knew the first time, and I already love this game, you know, it's just you'll be completely hooked too. And that's what I hope that people experience when they go out and try speedrunning. And it doesn't matter if it's like the most popular speedrun game out there. It doesn't matter if nobody's ever heard of it before. It's all about how much you enjoy from the practice of going through it, learning about it, and then applying it in a way that you might not have thought before.
Oh, that's that's great. Yeah, that I was actually talking to a friend today, and just about how different like being a fan of speedrunning is from like being a fan of football. And it's not that we don't have our big events. And it's not that, we don't have, the big trophies, so to speak. They're virtual trophies, but they're trophies nonetheless. But the fact that, I was glued to Arcus's stream a couple of weeks ago when he was trying to get a sub 30 in Legend of Zelda. I was glued to it. And it's, just being there for the practice, because the practice could be the main event at any moment. And you get invested in the personalities, you get invested in the games, you start, even just watching them, just starting to see, it's like, oh, that's interesting. That's really cool. I didn't know it could do that. And, that's the kind of stuff that kind of gets me excited about it. And that's why I was eventually just breaking down and going, okay, I'm sorry, I've just got to try to do one of these because, I'm now using up so much brain space for it anyway. So, on your stream particular, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you're running and what you're working on?
Oh gosh. So lately I haven't been running a whole lot just because of trying to keep up with some of the deadlines for the book. But I would typically stream, all manner of games that you've never heard of. And
those are sometimes the most fun. I gotta say, I've gotten quite hooked on a lot of those.
It matters a lot as far as like what I'm looking for, just because I enjoy going through this full process. I described it earlier as the investigation, routing, and execution phases. Yeah. A lot of times if you're jumping in on a game that has had a lot of people go through and look at it and try to do out routes and all the rest of that, I mean, you can try and do some of that all yourself, but a lot of it might be you're just confirming what people already know. Or you can skip to the end and just start doing runs. And that's fine. There's certain skills that go to each of those, but I understand perfectly that it might not be for everybody. For me, I love that stuff. I love to just start on something that nobody has tried to work on before and go from there. And just as an example, one of the games that I've been working on most recently is called Sylvan Tale, which is a Game Gear game. It was only released in Japan, and it is quite unknown. When I first started looking for a copy, for example, there had been a total of 3 sales of the game on eBay between 2011 and 2016.
Oh, wow.
So it's not one that shows up very often, but you know what? I stumbled upon it during one stream and really had a blast with it.
Yeah.
Everything else, I mean, I picked up a lot of these lesser-known games or oftentimes somewhat rare titles and just tried my hand at them. And the ones that are fun, sure, I'll take those to the next level and see what I can uncover with them, see how much I can push myself and go through this process and see what time falls out at the end. And that's what I really enjoy. So if you stop by my stream, sometimes you might see me doing attempts. Other times you might see me working out a route for something. Other times you might see me actually reverse engineering a game and coming up with a fancy little script that'll put hitboxes on the screen and all sorts of fun stuff like that. It's really anything, and all of that I would consider as part of valuable parts of the full speedrunning process.
Yeah. You actually answered a question I had for you, and when I was watching one of your streams of Sylvan Tale, I was looking at it, and obviously this is in Japanese, and I was going to ask you if there was ever an American version, because this game looks really good. As I was watching, I was like, I really want to play this. This looks great.
Yeah, Sylvan Tale specifically, there is a translation patch. This is a fan translation.
Oh, great.
But there is definitely no U.S. or European release. Never made it outside of Japan. So that's pretty much the only legitimate format that you can play it.
Yeah. And I know this topic is way too big, first of all, for a book, but even more so than a podcast episode. But anything you want to leave us with, if we got some listeners out there that are curious about either watching or playing, or just curious about your work.
I would say in general, if you're looking to find out more of what speedrunning is about, there's no simpler way than simply heading on over to Twitch and just finding some people who are working on a game that they love. And you can take that pretty far. Their enthusiasm is often infectious. And from that, you can decide whether it's something that you want to learn more about, whether it's something you're just fine watching, and really take it from there.
And there we go. So let me know what you think. Do check out our Facebook group on, obviously, Facebook. That was a little redundant. Yeah. But do check out our Facebook group. There, go check out our show notes page, technofunkboy.com/23. There we're going to have links to the free preview of that book. Also to all of Omnigamer's different social media sites, the Omnigamer on Twitter, Omnigamer on Twitch. Definitely check out his channel, some of his videos. You can find several of his videos on YouTube. He's been at Games Done Quick many times to run different games. They're all really worth watching. I really enjoy watching him run. We're also going to have their information on getting on our newsletter, on different things dealing with the Twin Galaxies and Todd Rogers controversy. And so please do go check that out. We really appreciate you tuning in, and we will catch you next week.
The Retro Zoo Super Show is brought to you by the Techno Funk Boy. Follow us on Twitter at Techno Funk Boy, on Facebook at the Techno Funk Boy, and sign up for our email list at technofunkboy.com. Also look for us on Spotify, iTunes, and Amazon for music. If you are so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast catcher. If you are not so inclined, you are obviously some sort of villain trying to conquer the world. Unowned music and gameplay clips are used for educational and critical purposes. Thank you for listening. Keep gaming. And once you have responsibilities that need to be done at this time, then you can game later.